The gavel strikes, echoing through the courtroom. A man in an orange jumpsuit, head bowed, stands before the judge. As he looks up, his eyes widen in shock. The judge leans forward, recognition dawning on her face. In this moment, captured on camera, two childhood friends are reunited. One on the bench, one in chains. This scene sets the stage for a story that challenges our understanding of justice and second chances. As we explore the intertwined paths of Malik Lawson and Judge Monique Hayes, we witness a tale of lost potential, unexpected compassion, and the complex nature of human relationships within the justice system. Their reunion, fraught with emotion and unspoken history, invites us to question our preconceptions about the roles we play in society and the power of our shared past. Stories like this remind us why change is so important. Don't just watch, join the community. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay inspired by real stories of justice and resilience every day. Share where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Together, we can amplify voices, spark change, and make every story count. Judge Monique Hayes sat poised on the bench, her gavel at the ready. The courtroom buzzed with the usual energy of a bond hearing, but there was nothing usual about what was about to unfold. Malik Lawson, a man in his late 40s, stood before her, his head bowed low. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame, a stark contrast to the crisp black robe Hayes wore. As Hayes glanced down at the case file, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. She looked up sharply, her eyes widening as they locked onto Lawson's downturned face. The shock of realization rippled through her body, causing her to lean forward slightly in her seat. Lawson and Hayes had once walked the same halls and shared the same dreams. Now, they stood on opposite sides of the law. Their diverging paths were a stark reminder of how life's twists and turns can lead childhood friends to vastly different destinations. The courtroom fell silent as the tension built. The other defendants, the bailiffs, and even the court reporter seemed to sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. Hayes's fingers tightened around her gavel, her knuckles whitening as she wrestled with the protocol of her position and the surge of memories threatening to overwhelm her. "Mr. Lawson," Hayes began, her voice soft with memory, a stark contrast to the authoritative tone she typically used in court. "I have known you since you were a young boy." At the sound of her voice, Lawson's head snapped up. His eyes, previously cast down in shame, now met Hayes's gaze. His face became a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, recognition, shame, and a flicker of the boy he once was, all warring for dominance. Lawson's lips parted, but no words came out. His hands, cuffed at the wrists, began to tremble. The weight of their shared history and the chasm of their current circumstances seemed to press down on him, threatening to buckle his knees. Hayes's face softened, the stern mask of the judge giving way to the girl who had once known Malik Lawson as a friend. For a moment, the courtroom faded away, and they were just two people grappling with the shock of an unexpected reunion and the bittersweet ache of paths not taken. As Lawson struggled to find his voice, the air crackled with unspoken questions. How had they arrived at this moment? What twists of fate had led one to the bench and the other to the defendant's stand? And most pressingly, how would this recognition impact the proceedings about to unfold? Judge Hayes leaned forward, her eyes searching Malik Lawson's face for traces of a boy she once knew. What she was about to reveal would leave everyone speechless. "Did you go to Nautilus for middle school?" Hayes asked, her voice softening with nostalgia. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken memories. For a moment, the stark walls of the courtroom seemed to fade. Hayes could almost hear the echo of sneakers on linoleum floors and smell the mixture of chalk dust and cafeteria food. It was here, in this diverse and vibrant setting, that she and Lawson had once shared classes, hopes, and the innocence of youth. Lawson's reaction was immediate and visceral. His eyes, previously downcast, now brimmed with tears. His cuffed hands trembled uncontrollably. The shame etched on his face gave way to an overwhelming tide of emotion. His lips quivered as he struggled to form words, but all that escaped was a choked, "Oh my goodness." The power of this unexpected reunion was palpable. For Lawson, it was a stark reminder of the path not taken, of potential unrealized. As Lawson fought to regain his composure, the tension in the courtroom built. The other defendants shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The court officers exchanged puzzled glances, their usual stoic expressions giving way to curiosity. Hayes's gaze never left Lawson as she prepared to share her recollections. "This was the nicest kid in middle school," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "He was the best kid in middle school." The impact of her statement was immediate. A collective intake of breath swept through the gallery. Lawson, unable to contain his emotion any longer, buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. At that moment, the weight of lost potential hung heavy in the air. The courtroom fell into a profound silence, broken only by Lawson's muffled cries. It spoke volumes of paths diverged, of choices made, and of the cruel twists of fate that can lead childhood friends to opposite sides of the law. As the reality of their shared past settled over the courtroom, the proceedings took on a new, poignant dimension. This was no longer just a case number or another face in the endless parade of defendants. It was a stark reminder of the human stories behind every court appearance and the complex web of circumstances that can shape a life's trajectory. The weight of memory can be crushing, especially when it illuminates the vast gulf between what was and what could have been. As Malik Lawson's sobs echoed through the courtroom, it became clear that this reunion was revealing far more than a shared past. Lawson's shoulders shook as he repeated, "Oh my goodness." Each utterance was a desperate attempt to process the flood of memories. The orange jumpsuit he wore seemed to shrink around him, a stark reminder of how far he had fallen from the promising young man Judge Hayes once knew. For Hayes, the memories were no less overwhelming. She saw flashes of a lanky boy with a quick smile and quicker wit. In her mind's eye, she could see him bent over a chemistry set, conducting experiments with unbridled enthusiasm. "Malik," Hayes said, her voice thick with emotion, "do you remember when we worked on that science fair project together? You were so determined to create the perfect crystal." She paused, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "And in debate club you always had the most compelling arguments. You could sway the entire room." With each memory Hayes shared, Lawson's composure crumbled further. These weren't just reminiscences. They were painful reminders of the potential he had squandered. The courtroom, usually a place of stern justice, now felt like a confessional, with years of regret laid bare for all to see. Research has shown that positive childhood experiences, such as supportive friendships and academic success, can significantly shape adult outcomes. The stark contrast between Lawson's promising youth and his current circumstances poignantly illustrates this fact. Somewhere along the way, the path that should have led to success took a sharp, devastating turn. As Hayes continued to speak, her words painted a picture of two lives that had once been closely intertwined, now separated by an almost unfathomable divide. She spoke of shared dreams, of late-night study sessions, of the bright futures they had all imagined for themselves. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Everyone present could sense that they were witnessing something profound, a moment where the lines between judge and defendant, success and failure, past and present had blurred beyond recognition. Finally, Hayes leaned forward, her eyes searching Lawson's face for any trace of the boy she once knew. Her next words came out as barely more than a whisper, but in the silent courtroom, they rang out like a thunderclap. "What happened to you, Malik?" The question hung in the air, a chasm of lost years stretching between them. It was more than just a query about the circumstances that had led Lawson to this moment. It was an expression of sorrow, of disbelief, of the profound sadness that comes from witnessing unfulfilled potential. As Lawson struggled to find words, the courtroom held its collective breath. The answer to Hayes's question promised to unravel a tale of wrong turns, missed opportunities, and the insidious power of addiction. It was a story that would reveal how two childhood friends could end up on opposite sides of the law, separated by choices, circumstances, and the unforgiving march of time. Malik Lawson's fall from grace was etched in the sorrowful faces of his family members, who watched from the gallery with heavy hearts. Their presence spoke volumes about the man Malik once was and the potential he had squandered. As Judge Hayes's words hung in the air, the courtroom became a stage for a tragedy of lost promise. In his youth, Malik had been more than just another face in the crowd. He was an honor roll student, his academic achievements a source of pride for his family and teachers alike. His natural aptitude for languages had led him to teach himself Spanish, a feat that impressed even his most accomplished peers. Malik's early potential seemed boundless, his future bright with possibilities. But somewhere along the way, Malik's path had taken a dark turn. The descent into addiction and crime was not a sudden plummet, but a gradual slide that eroded his potential day by day, choice by choice. As Judge Hayes looked at the man before her, she struggled to reconcile the image of the bright young student with the defendant, now facing serious charges. The statistics painted a grim picture of the correlation between drug addiction and criminal behavior. Studies showed that individuals struggling with substance abuse were significantly more likely to engage in criminal activities, often to support their habit. Malik's story was not unique, but it was no less tragic for its commonality. As the hearing progressed, the tension in the courtroom built. Everyone present seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to hear the specific circumstances that had led Malik to this moment. His family members clasped their hands tightly, their knuckles white with anxiety. Even the other defendants seemed to sense the weight of the moment, their own troubles momentarily forgotten as they watched the drama unfold. Judge Hayes's voice, when she finally spoke, was steady but tinged with sadness. "Mr. Lawson, you stand before this court charged with burglary and grand theft. These are serious offenses carrying significant penalties." The words fell heavily in the silent courtroom, each one a nail in the coffin of Malik's former life. Malik's cousin, Melissa, unable to contain her grief, spoke in a hushed tone to the person next to her. "If it had not been for Malik's addictions, he would not be where he is," she said, her voice barely audible but laden with regret. Her words underscored the insidious nature of addiction, how it could twist a person's moral compass and lead them down paths they never would have chosen otherwise. The air in the courtroom grew thick with the weight of wasted potential. It was as if everyone present could see the ghost of the man Malik might have been, standing in stark contrast to the reality before them. The charges against him, burglary and grand theft, were not violent crimes, but they spoke to a desperation born of addiction. As Judge Hayes continued to outline the charges, Malik's family listened with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. They had watched his struggle with addiction for years, helpless to stop his downward spiral. Melissa's words echoed in their minds. "He is not a violent person and has not hurt anyone but to feed his addictions. He always needed money, and it was easier to steal." The tragedy of Malik Lawson's fall from grace was not just his own, but a reflection of a larger societal issue. It stood as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of addiction and how it could derail even the most promising of lives. As the impact of addiction echoed through the courthouse, a deeper story unfolded outside. Malik Lawson's cousin Melissa stood before reporters, her voice heavy with regret. She painted a picture of a once bright young man whose potential had been eroded by substance abuse. Melissa revealed new details about Lawson's struggle which had begun in his teenage years. The promising student who had impressed teachers with his aptitude for languages found himself caught in a cycle of dependency. She described how his addiction led him to drop out of school in the 11th grade, marking the beginning of a steep decline. "He's not a violent person," Melissa insisted, her voice tinged with both defense and sorrow. "But to feed his addictions, he always needed money, and it became easier to steal." As Melissa continued, the full extent of Lawson's criminal history emerged. Each arrest, each stint in jail, was another link in the chain of addiction that had bound him for decades. The courtroom drama unfolding inside was just the latest chapter in a long saga of substance abuse and its consequences. The anticipation built as Melissa hesitated, seemingly wrestling with whether to reveal more. Finally, she took a deep breath and shared the most heartbreaking detail. Malik Lawson had spent nearly half of his adult life behind bars. This revelation landed like a hammer blow, driving home the stark reality of addiction's toll on a once promising life. The bright-eyed boy who had taught himself Spanish and excelled in his studies now stood as a cautionary tale, a living testament to the destructive power of substance abuse. As Melissa's words sank in, the gathered crowd fell silent. The tragedy of Malik Lawson's life was not just his own, but a reflection of a larger societal issue. His story stood as a stark reminder of how addiction can derail even the most promising of lives, turning potential into pain and dreams into despair. The cycle of addiction and incarceration that had defined Lawson's adult life highlighted a critical flaw in the justice system. It pointed to a need for more effective rehabilitation programs and support systems for those struggling with addiction. As the reporters dispersed and Melissa turned to rejoin her family inside the courtroom, the weight of Malik Lawson's lost years hung heavy in the air. His story, now laid bare for all to see, served as a poignant reminder of the human cost of addiction and the urgent need for compassion in the face of this devastating disease. Judge Hayes' brow furrowed as she examined Lawson's file, her eyes tracing the contours of a life shaped by the very system she represented. The courtroom held its breath, sensing that this moment could mark a turning point, not just for Lawson, but for the larger question of justice in America. As Hayes considered the case before her, she couldn't help but reflect on the systemic issues at play. The conflict between punishment and rehabilitation had long plagued the legal system, and Lawson's situation brought that tension into sharp focus. Was another stint behind bars really the answer, or was it time to consider a different approach? As Hayes weighed her options, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Lawson stood silently, his shoulders slumped under the weight of uncertainty. His family watched from the gallery, their faces a mixture of hope and resignation. They had witnessed the revolving door of the justice system before, but perhaps this time, with a judge who saw beyond the charges, things might be different. Hayes' decision would represent more than just another ruling. It would be a crossroads, not only for Lawson, but for the very idea of justice in cases like his. Would she opt for another stint in jail, following the well-worn path of punishment, or would she seize this opportunity to break the cycle, to offer a chance at true redemption? The courtroom held its collective breath as Hayes prepared to speak. When she finally broke the silence, her voice carried both the authority of her position and a hint of the compassion that had marked her earlier exchanges with Lawson. "Mr. Lawson," she began, "I've considered your case carefully. Taking into account your history and the nature of the charges, I'm setting your bond at $43,000. The figure hung in the air, its significance not lost on anyone present. It was a substantial sum, reflecting the seriousness of the charges, yet it wasn't insurmountable, leaving open the possibility of release and, perhaps, a different kind of intervention. Hayes' decision walked a fine line between the demands of the law and the potential for rehabilitation, embodying the complex balance the justice system struggled to maintain. As the hearing concluded, the air in the courtroom was thick with possibility. For Lawson, the road ahead remained uncertain, but a glimmer of hope had emerged. The cycle that had defined his life for so long had, for the moment, paused. What would happen next was up to him, his support system, and a justice system grappling with its own role in breaking the chains of addiction and recidivism. As the gavel fell, signaling the end of the hearing, Judge Hayes' demeanor shifted. her eyes fixed on Lawson with an intensity that transcended her judicial role. The weight of their shared history pressed against her professional boundaries, challenging the cold formality of the justice system. Hayes leaned forward, her voice low but clear. "Mr. Lawson," she began, "I want you to know that this isn't the end of your story." Her words, carefully chosen, carried the weight of their past and the potential for his future. For Hayes, this moment represented a profound conflict between her duty as a judge and her connection to the man before her. She saw beyond the defendant to the boy she once knew, a reminder of shared laughter and youthful dreams. "I remember the potential you had, Malik. It's still there. Waiting for you to reclaim it." Her gaze never wavered from Lawson's face, searching for a flicker of recognition, a spark of the person she once knew. The impact of judicial empathy on defendant outcomes is significant. Studies show that when judges demonstrate compassion and personal interest in a defendant's future, it can foster hope and motivation for rehabilitation. Hayes's words, breaking from typical legal proceedings, held the power to be a turning point for Lawson. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Other defendants leaned forward, court officers' expressions softened, and even the court reporter hesitated as if unsure how to capture this moment of raw humanity. "When you're released," Hayes said, her voice gaining strength, "take a hard look at your life. Remember your dreams. It's not too late to turn things around." Her words hung in the air, a lifeline thrown across the chasm separating their lives. The courtroom held its collective breath, sensing the weight of this moment. Would these words of encouragement be the catalyst for change, or would they fade in the harsh light of addiction and circumstance? Hayes's final words resonated through the room. "I believe in second chances, Mr. Lawson. More importantly, I believe in you. Make this a new beginning." With these words, she offered a rare glimpse of the person behind the gavel, her compassion a stark contrast to the usual proceedings. As the hearing concluded, a palpable shift had occurred. Lawson's eyes, which had been downcast throughout much of the proceedings, now held a glimmer of something that looked remarkably like hope. The courtroom had witnessed more than just another hearing. It had seen compassion's power to offer a chance at redemption, where before there had seemed to be none. In an age where privacy seems elusive, even intimate moments can become global spectacles. Within hours, Judge Hayes's words of encouragement to Malik Lawson reached millions of screens, sparking intense debate. The video, captured on a spectator's phone, spread rapidly across social media platforms. What began as a local news story quickly transformed into a national phenomenon, amassing over 10 million views within 24 hours. The raw emotion displayed by both Lawson and Hayes resonated deeply with viewers, transcending geographical and cultural boundaries. As the video gained traction, it elicited a wide range of reactions. Many were moved by the judge's compassion and Lawson's visible remorse, while others questioned the appropriateness of such a personal exchange in a courtroom setting. The viral nature of the video thrust both Hayes and Lawson into the spotlight. Their personal history now a matter of public discourse. Local news stations began digging into their shared past, interviewing former classmates and teachers from Nautilus Middle School. Overnight, their story became a symbol of larger issues plaguing the American justice system. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a sociologist specializing in media and criminal justice, noted, "This video has the power to humanize both the accused and those tasked with upholding the law. It challenges our preconceptions about the justice system and forces us to confront the complex realities behind each case." The viral moment raised questions about how such widespread attention might affect Lawson's case. Legal experts debated whether the publicity would pressure the court to show leniency or if it might lead to stricter scrutiny, to avoid accusations of favoritism. Lawson's family, while grateful for the support, expressed concern about the added pressure on Malik as he faced his legal challenges. As days passed, the video's impact continued to ripple outward. National news outlets framed it within larger discussions about criminal justice reform. Advocacy groups seized the moment to push for changes in how the system handles cases involving addiction and nonviolent offenses. The private exchange between Hayes and Lawson had become a rallying cry for those seeking a more compassionate approach to justice. What began as an unexpected reunion in a Miami courtroom had evolved into a national conversation about the nature of justice, the power of compassion, and the possibility of redemption. As millions continued to watch and share the video, it became clear that its impact would extend far beyond the lives of Judge Hayes and Malik Lawson, challenging society to reflect on its values and the true meaning of second chances. Malik Lawson's journey since the viral courtroom moment had taken unexpected turns. As he stood outside the courthouse, now a free man, the weight of his past mingled with the promise of a new beginning. The challenges of rebuilding a life after decades of addiction and incarceration remained daunting, but Lawson had made significant strides. In the months following his release, Lawson had immersed himself in rehabilitation with unwavering determination. His voice, once hesitant in support group meetings, now resonated with strength and conviction. Therapy sessions became a crucible for personal growth as he confronted the root causes of his substance abuse. One pivotal moment came when Lawson secured a position at a local community center, despite his criminal record. The job offered more than just financial stability. It provided a platform for Lawson to give back to others struggling with similar challenges. His personal experiences became a powerful tool in connecting with and inspiring those on the brink of giving up. Another milestone arrived when Lawson celebrated 6 months of sobriety. The achievement, marked by a small gathering of supporters, reinforced his commitment to recovery and served as a testament to his resilience. Each day, sober was a victory, a step further from his past and closer to the man he aspired to be. As Lawson waited outside the courthouse, his mind drifted to Judge Monique Hayes, the woman who had sparked this journey of redemption. Her words of encouragement had become a lifeline in his darkest moments, a reminder of the potential she saw in him. The anticipation of seeing her again, this time as a man actively working towards recovery, filled him with a mixture of nervousness and hope. The sound of approaching footsteps drew Lawson from his thoughts. He turned to see Judge Hayes walking towards him, her judicial robes replaced by casual attire. For a moment, they stood facing each other, the years and circumstances that separated them seeming to dissolve. Hayes' face broke into a warm smile as she closed the distance between them. Without hesitation, she hugged Lawson, her actions speaking volumes. As they embraced, Lawson felt a surge of emotion, a testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of change. "I'm proud of you, Malik," Hayes said as they separated, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to do something good for somebody else. I know it." In that moment, their reunion symbolized more than just a personal triumph. It stood as a beacon of hope for all those struggling to break free from the cycles of addiction and incarceration. As Lawson and Hayes stood together on the courthouse steps, their shared history and divergent paths converging once more, they embodied the promise of second chances and the transformative power of belief in human potential. Malik Lawson stepped into the bustling streets of Miami, a free man with a second chance at life. His eyes shone with newfound clarity and determination as he faced the challenges ahead. The weight of his past remained, but it no longer threatened to consume him. Lawson's first steps into this new chapter were purposeful. He had crafted a meticulous plan for his future during his time in rehabilitation. Employment was his primary goal, a challenge made more daunting by his criminal record. But Lawson was resolute in his pursuit of a fresh start. Each day brought its own set of trials. The temptation of old habits lingered, but Lawson relied on the tools he had acquired in rehab to weather these moments. His struggle was constant, matched only by his unwavering resolve. Support came from unexpected quarters. Judge Hayes had connected Lawson with local businesses willing to give second chances to those in recovery. Lawson immersed himself in job training programs, determined to prove his worth and contribute meaningfully to society. Rebuilding relationships proved to be both a source of strength and a challenge. Some family members welcomed him back, while others remained cautious. Lawson accepted their hesitation with humility, understanding that trust takes time to rebuild. Months passed, and Lawson's determination never faltered. He secured a position at a local community center, working with at-risk youth. This role brought new challenges and rewards. Lawson found himself developing innovative programs to engage troubled teens, drawing on his own experiences to connect with them on a deeper level. One particularly impactful initiative was a mentorship program pairing recovering addicts with young people struggling with substance abuse. Lawson's insights helped shape the program's approach, emphasizing peer support and practical life skills. The success stories that emerged from this program became a source of pride and motivation for Lawson. As he stood before a group of recovering addicts, sharing his story, Lawson felt a surge of gratitude. His voice, once silenced by shame, now rang out clear and strong. "This second chance has allowed me to become the person I was always meant to be," he said, his words carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. Lawson's journey was far from over. The road ahead held both promise and challenges. But as he looked towards the future, his eyes clear and his resolve unshaken, Lawson knew one thing for certain. This new chapter was just the beginning of a story he was determined to write, one that would inspire others to seek their paths to redemption. While the viral video featuring Judge Monique Hayes and Malik Lawson had faded from the headlines, its impact continued to reverberate through the halls of justice. In her chambers, Judge Hayes sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of her desk as she reflected on the encounter that had changed her perspective on the very nature of justice. The weight of her role as a judge had always been a heavy burden, but now it felt different. Hayes's mind wandered back to that fateful day when she recognized Malik Lawson, the bright-eyed boy from her past, standing before her as a defendant. The raw emotion of that moment had stripped away the veneer of judicial detachment, forcing her to confront the human stories behind each case file. As she pondered her evolving approach, Hayes felt the tension between maintaining judicial impartiality and showing compassion. It was a delicate balance, one that she now navigated with a heightened awareness of the power she held to shape lives. She recalled the words of a colleague who had warned her against letting emotion cloud her judgment, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted within her. In the weeks following her encounter with Lawson, Hayes had noticed subtle changes in her courtroom demeanor. She found herself looking more closely at the faces before her, searching for glimmers of potential beneath the weight of circumstances. Her questions became more probing, seeking to understand the paths that had led individuals to her courtroom. Recent research on the impact of empathy in judicial decisions echoed in Hayes's mind. Studies had shown that judges who demonstrated empathy and understanding often saw lower rates of recidivism among defendants. The data supported what Hayes had begun to feel intuitively, that compassion could be a powerful tool in breaking the cycle of crime and punishment. As she contemplated the broader implications of her experience, Hayes felt a sense of anticipation building. She knew that her evolving approach represented more than just a personal shift. It had the potential to spark change within the system itself. The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. With a deep breath, Hayes made a decision. She reached for a legal pad and began to outline new practices she would implement in her courtroom. At the top of the list, increased focus on rehabilitation options for nonviolent offenders, especially those struggling with addiction. She wrote quickly, her pen barely keeping pace with her thoughts as she envisioned a justice system that balanced punishment with genuine opportunities for redemption. As she finished writing, Hayes leaned back in her chair, a mixture of determination and hope settling over her. She knew that change would not come easily. The system was deeply entrenched in its ways, resistant to shifts that might be seen as soft on crime, but Hayes was prepared for the challenge. Her encounter with Lawson had awakened something in her, a renewed sense of purpose and a belief in the power of second chances. Hayes's evolving approach represented a small but significant shift in the justice system. As she gathered her robes and prepared to enter the courtroom, she carried with her the weight of this new responsibility. Each case that came before her would be an opportunity to balance the scales of justice with a measure of compassion, to see the humanity behind the charges, and to offer hope where before there had been only judgment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the community center's basketball court, Malik Lawson stood before a group of teenagers. Their faces, a mix of curiosity and skepticism, reflected the harsh realities of growing up in a neighborhood where dreams often felt out of reach. Lawson took a deep breath and began to speak. "I was once where you are," he said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. The teens shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others crossing their arms defensively. Lawson's eyes scanned the crowd, recognizing the look of defiance he once wore like armor. Lawson shared his journey, focusing on the moments that led to his transformation. He spoke of a fellow inmate who taught him to read, opening up a world of possibilities he never knew existed. He described the day he decided to enroll in a prison education program, despite the ridicule from other inmates. These small steps, he explained, were the foundation of his recovery. The room fell silent as Lawson's words painted a vivid picture of a life reclaimed. A young girl in the front row nodded in understanding, while a boy in the back uncrossed his arms, his tough facade cracking. Lawson's story challenged the romanticized notions of street life that many of these teens had grown up with. Lawson was acutely aware of the stigma he carried. Some parents had protested his presence at the community center, but Lawson had persevered, believing that his experiences could serve as a bridge to understanding. When Lawson opened the floor for questions, hands shot up across the room. "How did you handle the temptations once you got out?" one girl asked, her voice steady but her eyes revealing vulnerability. Another wanted to know how Lawson had rebuilt relationships with his family. Their questions revealed a hunger for practical guidance. Lawson's answers were honest and specific. He spoke of the job training program that had given him a sense of purpose and the support group that became his second family. As he talked, he could see sparks of recognition in some of the teens' eyes. It was a familiar sight, one that reminded him of his own journey towards redemption. He shared the story of Marcus, a young man he had mentored who had recently been accepted to college. Marcus had come from a family plagued by addiction, but through consistent support and guidance, he had found a new path. Lawson's voice swelled with pride as he described Marcus's transformation. As the session drew to a close, a tall boy who had been quiet throughout approached Lawson. "I want to know more about that job training program," he said, his voice hesitant but determined. Lawson felt a surge of hope. In that moment, he understood the true power of shared experiences and the ripple effect of compassion. Lawson's journey was ongoing, but as he looked at the faces of the teens before him, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be. His story had become more than a cautionary tale. It was a roadmap for those seeking a way forward, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of second chances. The Hayes-Lawson encounter in that Miami courtroom had far-reaching consequences. Judge Hayes's compassionate recognition of Malik Lawson, a man who had once been her bright middle school classmate, set in motion a profound journey. Lawson, who had struggled with addiction and found himself on the wrong side of the law, discovered renewed purpose and direction. Their shared history bridged the divide between judge and defendant, revealing the person behind the criminal record. This moment of connection resonated beyond their personal experiences, challenging established notions of justice and rehabilitation. In community centers and legal circles, discussions arose about the potential for change and the value of second chances. The story of Hayes and Lawson became a powerful symbol of transformation within the justice system. It highlighted how childhood bonds could illuminate paths to redemption, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Their unexpected reunion served as a reminder that compassion and understanding have the power to alter lives and reshape perspectives on law and order. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. If it moved you, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of these daily stories that matter. Together, we can shine a light on justice, empathy, and the power of storytelling. Don't just watch, be part of the movement. Share where you're watching from in the comments, and we'll see you in the next story that inspires change.